Welcome back for another edition of Beyond the Faceoff with my friend Ryan Galloway. How are you doing today, Ryan?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking, Kev. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and yeah, one of our previous episodes, you said the that your officiating has taken you around the world on many different opportunities. So today's theme is going to be talking about international travel and international officiating as well. So I'm anxious to hear what you have to say about some of your experiences around the world. So why don't we start off with the very simple question: is how did you get first involved in refereeing internationally, and sort of what was your path to get there?
Yeah, in Canada, in the U.S. it was a little bit different, but in Canada for sure, your progression up through the different levels hopefully gave you the opportunity to work international tournament, whether it was a World Juniors or World Senior Championship, or if you got the opportunity to go to the Olympics. But it was it was one of the rewards you got for consistent hard work. Um, to be able to you know we had this discussion with some people that we met a couple weeks back that a lot of times you don't think of the officials that go to these events, of how important it is for them. You always think of the players going to represent their country and wearing their teams or their country's colors. I think the one thing we forget and we need to remember is that whether the officials from Canada, whether they're from Switzerland, the amount of work it takes for an official to get an opportunity like that, and how personally rewarding it is, even though we're not officiating for our country. We're definitely not working a game and paying any favoritism to our home country. We're out there obviously to uphold the integrity of the game, but it's equally as important and rewarding for those officials to represent their countries and represent their branches and represent their programs that they came from. So to be able to get those kind of opportunities, first of all, you have to be very fortunate. There's only so many of those opportunities that come around. So to be able to get those opportunities, it's a really special thing, and it's like I think I mentioned earlier that we don't get the trophy, we don't get the ring, we don't get the medal, whatever it is. Our as officials, our what we deem as a success and the reward is those extrinsic opportunities of going to represent and work tournaments like that, and being able to work deep into the tournament and work, hopefully getting to work the gold medal games. Those are the rewards we get.
So what type of international uh, opportunities and tournaments have you been involved with personally?
So I worked a few worked a few Team Canada events in Canada. Worked some national stuff, but international. Um, Worked the World Junior C Championships in Slovenia. I'm going to get the years wrong. 90, 94, 90, 93, 94. And then the following year, worked the World Junior Championships in Switzerland. Um, that was the last of my international events, outside of the country that I'd worked until I turned pro. And then late in my career in the NHL, being able to go over to, coincidentally enough, you're wearing the Prague sweater, but to be able to go over to Berlin, Germany, and Prague in Czechia to go and work exhibition and regular season games there on behalf of the NHL. Again, opportunities that never would have thought was possible, from officiating, but to be able to see the country, to see the world, and be able to do something that you love at the same time was incredibly rewarding. So yeah, great opportunities.
So yeah, you said you've done some NHL games there. So of course the ice surface is going to be NHL regulation game uh, arenas there. But what about the international ice? What's sort of the biggest differences between officiating with those larger ice surfaces versus North American ice?
Officiating is all about sightlines, and it's all about getting into the right spot. So when you add on not only length of the ice surface but also the width of the ice surface, the spots that you would normally be in on an NHL size rink are completely different than what you would on an international. So, uh, like the international tournaments that I worked, they were all international ice. The game that we did in Berlin was on that was international ice. The game in Prague was NHL size. Um, so not only sight lines, but also if it normally took you three strides to get between the blue lines, now it might be four or five. So everything about reading and reacting to the play was just that much different because you had more space you had to cover to get to the line. So yeah, it was an adjustment, even visually of I'd be guessing, but the extra 15, 20 feet across the ice, it just changes everything of visually how you work the game.
So yeah, after you've done an international game, then coming back to an NHL size rink, did you find that your skill sets has changed and sort of, I guess, been more appreciative of how well you actually know the North American rink size?
Well, I think the biggest thing is you realize just how much tighter that ice surface is, and how much more physicality can happen on the smaller ice surface just because it's more contained. Um, and for us in positioning of you don't have as much ice surface to work with to get out of the way of the play, so you have to be reacting a lot quicker to get off the board so the puck can get past you, or moving off the board so you're not making contact with the players. Um, yeah, it was certainly an adjustment, probably more so going from the North American NHL size rink to the international than it was coming back. But you
Mm.
you definitely notice and you can understand why the international game seems so much more wide open and not as tight checking a game as there is on an NHL surface. Uh, I even look at the college league that I'm working now, and there's a one rink for sure that still uses international ice surface, and just how different the game looks from
Mm.
from the press box. How different the line changes happen, just because there is that extra ice, and visually how far off the face-off dots are from the boards and how far up they are off the end boards. It's just a totally different look to the game.
And would you recommend some of the up and coming linesmen and referees to take the opportunity to go do some games on some international ice?
Oh, I mean, sure. Getting the opportunity to work. I mean, I don't think what you're saying is getting the opportunity to work
Yeah,
international games, but just to experience what it's like to work on
yeah,
international ice. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I mean, you're not going to have a lot of experience of working on an international rink, but to just experience the difference, and how much more adjustment needs to be made, and how different the game becomes. It's certainly an experience for sure.
So, yeah, you said you've only done a couple of international games outside of Canada. So, can you recall some of the memorable moments in those games?
Well, I think for me the most memorable was working the gold medal game at the World Junior C Championships. Um, Again, as I said before, our our reward is the opportunity to work those kind of games. So to get the nod, first of all, for my branch and Hockey Canada, to get the opportunity to go represent the country, um, to then also get the nod from the IHF that you'd done a good enough job throughout the tournament to get the opportunity to work the gold medal game. That's probably one of the biggest highlights of my international career. Um, Obviously, coming from North America, we see how the U.S. and Canada rally around the World Junior Championships. To be able to go to Switzerland and experience that Canada was playing in the gold medal game, so I didn't have the opportunity to work there. But um, to be able to go to one of the biggest stages and be able to work that tournament was pretty cool experience. And then my games over in Europe, I still keep in touch on almost a daily basis. I'll get a Snapchat or something from the linesman that I worked over in Berlin with. So the relationships that you form. The amazing thing about hockey officials, it doesn't matter where you come from. Um, the personality and the people are all generally the same. You know, you might have some language barriers and some differences in procedures, but the mindset and personality of an official just seems to be consistent no matter where you go. So, Tim, the gentleman I know from Berlin, I mean, he's just a quality man, and it's been a pleasure getting to know him. And that's a relationship. If it wasn't for this game, that I never would have had the opportunity to have had.
Yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, by doing those international tournaments, you definitely notice a different type of play from the European versus the North American style. And how does that affect your way to officiate a game like that?
Well, yeah, it's that open ice kind of style of play where there isn't that same physicality to the game. It's more of a it's more of a finesse game because there is more excuse me, more ice for them to maneuver around and gain positioning on their opposition. Um, so it changes things, and because of how the international game is played and the enforcement of the rules, you don't have kind of the same you don't have the same fights, and you don't have the as much physicality and kind of those strange things that you see in the North American game. It's a totally different style of game. I still think the best hockey is when you watch the gold medal game of the Olympics. Of you're seeing best on best playing an open ice style of game where their true skills are allowed to show, and that changes our view on the game as well as officials. That we maybe don't need to be as focused on some of that extra stuff that we might need to worry about working North American games. That you can more focus on the game itself and the overall flow of the game.
You had mentioned that you've had sort of like language barriers with some of your colleagues, but you are united in the game itself. That's sort of what has bonded you and brought you together. What about on the ice? What are some of the biggest challenges you faced officiating in a foreign league or tournament? Like language barrier, I think would be one with players and coaches. And how do you communicate effectively with them when they're calling you over to get clarification on a call or something like that?
Yeah, I think in communication you just need to be more precise and more definitive in the words that you're choosing. That you don't have the ability to use the extra words that you might use. Like in the conversation we're having, you have to be more definitive and to the point of what you're trying to get across. Obviously, the signaling becomes important.
Mm.
The IHF does a good job of before you go to a tournament like that they have their own obviously their own rule book, but they also have their own procedures and positioning that you need to be aware of. And what that does is it eases that transition from working your Hockey Canada or Hockey US games where you have procedures there to now you're working with a guy from Switzerland or a guy from Finland or Russia, wherever they're from, that they're all trained on the IHF rulebook when they're procedures when they're going to that. So the transition actually is relatively simple in that sense. Uh, yeah, language would probably be the biggest barrier, but I've been pretty fortunate that aside from a few officials, for the most part, everybody kind of understands a little bit of English that you can get the message across and the point across, and when they're communicating with you that they know enough of the words to be able to do it and or to be able to understand what they're saying. Um, and then it just becomes those little things that we do on the ice that communicate and send messages to each other that unless you're looking for it, you don't really know and pay attention to it. But the officials out on the ice definitely use those kind of little subtle cues to each other to be able to communicate with positioning procedures.
Okay. So yeah, it sort of brings up another question: is the bringing up and the training. How is the different countries train and develop their referees? How does that compare to Canada and the NHL system?
Well, I think more of those countries are doing a really good job now of their training. In fact, I'd probably say it sometimes their training might be actually um, more involved in not only do they train for the game itself and the rules and the understanding of the rules, but they're very focused on fitness and the off ice training and skating tests. Like when I would go to those tournaments, we had a skating session every day, because it's just a different way that they look at the game of you train as hard as officials as you do as players. Um, the A lot of the leagues have brought your American North American officials over that I think has helped their program in passing along some of the stuff that we do over here because we see more hockey. We might have more experience to be able to pass along some of the ideas that we use here and implementing them into their games. And previously they've also sent officials over from Europe to work North American games. So I think we're doing a good job of kind of having that. What's it called when when a foreign student comes over? But
Like an exchange program.
like yeah, exchange program to be able to have North American officials go over there and work with their officials,
Yeah.
and then likewise for European officials to come over here and work games here, to be able to bring that back and help train the officials there.
So while you're doing some of the games over there, have you encountered any cultural differences in how players or coaches or even fans react to some of your officiating decisions?
Yeah, it's definitely a different feel in the building. It's at times it's a little more reserved. Times where it's they're not quite as loud. But then as thinking of the story the other day of when we were over in Berlin working games, and so it was two NHL officials working with two German officials, and we come off the ice, and nobody's booing out there. We're thinking we're having a great game, everything's going well, and but man, were they whistling lots. And we come into the dressing room, and me and the other North American or the NHL official were talking. So yeah, everybody's whistling. I guess they're having a good time. And they said, no, no, no. That's what they do over here when they're not happy with the job you're doing. So we quickly realized that cultural differences, that maybe we weren't doing quite as good a job as we thought we were, and they were letting us know. But yeah, I mean, there's those small subtle things. Like I remember in Prague, like it was like watching a soccer game. The fans were up on their feet and they're dancing around and chanting and singing, and it was constantly something. There was very little piped in music because the fans were so engaged in the game that they didn't need any of that outside entertainment. They were creating their own entertainment. Um, and then on the ice, I think some countries may have a different acceptance and tolerance for how they treat officials. Where I think sometimes in North America we let players, coaches get away with treating the officials probably not to the acceptable level. Where some European countries, I mean, you don't talk back to the referees. You treat them with respect, and you call them sir, and there's just a different mindset of the official player coaches relationship that I think would be beneficial, especially at the younger ages in North America, and trying to deal with some of the abuse that happens in the rinks. if we could instill even a portion of that, I think we'd be doing a great job of increasing the hockey culture and carrying that forward.
That's very interesting. I did not know that they treat the officials with better respect over in the European League. So, yeah, I'd love to see that come over to the North American brand over here. Out of all of your international experience, what is one lesson that you've learned from officiating that you think every up and coming official should know?
One thing for my international. Yeah,
Did I just make you speechless?
you kind of did, which based off of the lengths of our previous podcast, I'm kind of surprised myself here. Um,
Like whether it be
I think, yeah, I will say one thing. We talk. I mentioned about the importance of the IHF having procedures in place, and so that when officials come from different countries that have different procedures and different language barriers, that going into that situation can make that transition easier and more seamless. And I think that's a valuable thing to remember. Hockey Canada has a pretty good procedures manual of what they expect from their officials, and a lot of times it's used as a way to develop and have officials learn the fundamentals before they kind of get the flexibility and the freedom to battle for better sightlines. We form the foundations of those procedures, and they're there for a reason. But I think as well, the reason why those procedures are there in place is that if you do get the opportunity to work a national tournament, that if you're working with a guy from BC or a guy from Nova Scotia that you've never worked with before, or you're from Boston, you're working with a guy from California, that you're still working under those same procedures, so that even though you might have a different view on the game and your experience might be different, ultimately when we get together and work, we're still working under those same procedures. So that's probably the biggest takeaway, that those procedures that are put in place that sometimes seem cumbersome and very robotic, a lot of times are there for a very good reason, to make those transitions. Not only you can even break it down to within the province that I might be working with I'm from Winnipeg, and I might be working with a guy from Flin Flon, but we're still working under those same procedures, even though our experiences might be very different. We're still working under those same procedures. So I think that's probably the one takeaway from the IHF, is that those procedures are there for a pretty good reason.
Yeah. So we mentioned it before that you weren't allowed to officiate the gold medal game because Team Canada was in the final. So why don't you sort of go through explain why officials can't officiate their own country when it comes to an international tournament like that? And yeah, I'm sure you have an opinion or two on something like that too. So jump on in.
Yeah, that's been a bone of contention since I first got into that. And listen, it's not only at the international level; it also happens at you know almost every level where you've got different areas that are represented, that you don't generally work those games where your area is involved. And to me, I've always found that strange, that you're before the official even steps on the ice, you're already questioning their integrity. You have four individuals or three individuals out on the ice who their sole role is to have integrity and unbiased viewpoints. That to put that in place has always been something I've never understood. Like you should have the best officials working the game, regardless of where they're from. Um, their integrity should never come into question. And God forbid that it ever happens where an official does show some bias, then that's to that own official's detriment for any future opportunities. But I just I've always had a hard time wrapping my head around calling into question the integrity of an official that doesn't get the opportunity to work. The gold medal game. If Canada's working, or let's go outside of Canada. if Finland's playing in the final championship and the best referee comes from Finland, why is the best referee not working that game?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've always had a hard time with it. But that's the mindset. Um, I'm sure it happens when you go to a national tournament here in Canada that if Manitoba was playing, that chances are I would be working a Manitoba game, and that to me just doesn't seem right. So,
Yeah, I totally agree, and especially when you're talking like at an Olympic elite level, it's like these are athletes that have competed and trained for the 4 year cycle to be able to compete at that highest level. You should have the highest level of officiating for whatever sport there is to be able to fairly call the game. Doesn't matter, yeah, like you said, doesn't matter what country that they're from. They should have the highest level and the ones that have proven themselves throughout the entire tournament as well. So,
yeah.
but no, 100% agree with you on that one. So further to, what advice would you give to some young officials who aspire to officiate at an international level?
Right, those opportunities only are there, and they're given as a reward for hard work and dedication and the quality of the work that you do. So my best piece of advice for any official trying to progress, whether it's international or even to the next highest level at their in their areas, is you have to be working hard all the time. You have to be committed to your role as an official. Um, and when you prove that you're able to work at that, hopefully that opportunity is there for you. I don't think your preparation to go for an international tournament should be any different than it is for working the final game in whatever league you're working. You should be working every night, and hopefully you get the reward and the recognition from your branch or your country's governing body to give you that opportunity to go over there. So that's my best piece of advice. That's my best piece of advice for anything. Don't ever take a night off. Don't ever prepare differently for a game at any time during the season, whether it's preseason or postseason. If you're not preparing at 100% every night, then you're not doing the job, the justice that it did. You're not doing justice to the game, and you're not you're not serving the game the way it should be. So
Yeah.
prepare every game the same way, and hopefully those opportunities come around.
No, that's awesome, awesome advice. So, before we jump in, we have some questions that I'm going to be asking you. So we'll be heading to overtime here pretty soon.
Don't
But
say overtime. We talked about this last time. Can we call it something else? Can we call it like bonus material? Let's not call it overtime.
well, we
All
already
right.
said overtime, so it's going to be overtime. But any other experiences before we jump into that? International experiences that you've had any stories about the travel, the locations that you've been? I'm sure somebody would like to hear a story about your time in whether it be Prague or Berlin, or because you do have some downtime because you're not on the ice 24/7 while you're doing that tournament. So any fun stories that you wish to share with everyone?
Yeah, you know what? No specific stories I can tell on this, anyways. Um, but I learned probably. I always tried to do it, but um, I did it more so later in my career of taking the opportunity when I was in a city to experience the city, and it's really easy to sit in the hotel room and turn on the TV and watch that, but how many opportunities do you have to go over to Berlin or to Prague or Geneva, Switzerland? How many opportunities do you have to do that where not only do you have a lot of time away from your work responsibilities to be able to experience another culture or another city? So take the time and go out and explore. When we went over to Berlin, my wife and I, we probably wore down shoes just walking around. We walked around Prague. I think we did 15 kilometers one day of just walking around, seeing everything that we could. Because I mean, who knows if I ever get the opportunity to go back there? So take advantage of those. So that'd be my best piece of advice. I don't care if you're going to Grand Prairie, Alberta, to work a tournament there, and it's Grand Prairie, and you don't think there's anything there. Get out and see the area. Get out and do stuff and experience it. I mean, when I went over to Grand Prairie to work the Canada Winter Games, the opportunity to go and see the area and just explore something that if it wasn't for hockey, I would never have been there, and I might never get to go back there. So take the opportunity when you can.
So, any particular sites that sort of amazed you? Like, I know we were talking off air about when you were at Prague. You were just amazed at like some of the architecture around there. But were there any other spots in your travels where hockey has taken you that sort of stand out in your mind?
Well, probably the most probably the most memorable and um, moving personally experiences I had was when I was over in Berlin. Was to see their history and what they went through, um, and to see how they've kept it visible for the point of a reminder that we never want to go back there. Um, to see some of the monuments to when we were over there, um, it was just after the Russian Ukraine war had started, and I remember we were walking down the main street up through the Brandenburg Gates, and on one side was the Russian embassy, and there was just a makeshift monument that was set up, and like flowers and pictures, and people sending messages of their family in Ukraine, what they were going through. And probably the most touching thing I saw was in this monument was this there were a bunch of toys and dolls and little shoes that were just set up. And I'll never forget this little girl. I bet you she wasn't more than 4 years old. And she was crouched down and she's just looking at these toys. And any other kid that age that saw toys would reach out and want to play with them. But she just sat there fixated on these toys. And it was the most heart wrenching, touching thing. Like if I took a picture of it, and that could be on the cover of every Time issue of the most incredibly touching, humbling images that you could ever imagine. Was this little girl just looking at these toys, understanding that there's something behind this, and there's something deeper than it's just toys. That there's some child over there that's suffering because of what's going on, and I could go on and talking about it, but it was the most unbelievable image that I think I've ever seen in my international travels. Was this little girl who she had no idea that anybody was looking at her, but if a picture could say 1,000 words, that image was just tore my heart out.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's a very personable moment that you just shared. So I appreciate you sharing that. And like you said, get out and see these places that you're going to, so you can experience moments like that. So definitely, I would second Ryan's thought about when you get to a city, if hockey is taking you there, go out and explore and take advantage of all those opportunities. And with that, it's time for. And the questions that we have today kind of relate to travel, so it would be international travel definitely fits into this. Because you are traveling all the time when you're when you were working, you ate a lot of restaurant food. So it wasn't your choice to do that, but what was one thing that you would like to have eaten that you couldn't get on the road?
Oh, what would it be? Well, sometimes the simplest things are the the ones that stick out. My go-to every time I would get home off the road um, was a peanut butter and honey sandwich. As simple as that is, was a peanut butter and honey sandwich. And I think not only because I mean I love just the flavor, but it was just the simple idea of being able to make something quick and you know I've been eating it since I was a kid. That was that's the one thing that when I would get off the road that I absolutely craved was to have a peanut butter and honey sandwich. How simple is that? Not a steak, not some roasted chicken that I'd cooked. It was a peanut butter and honey sandwich.
Have you ever phoned down to a restaurant for room service and requested that?
No, no. Why would I pay for something? Why would I pay for something I can make myself? And if I ate it on the road, then it wasn't going to be special when I was at home.
That's true. That's true. All right. So this is going to be fun ones. Some of your pet peeves in airplanes and pet peeves in airports.
Ugh. Did we want to just do a whole episode just on that? Like, I don't think we have enough time. All right,
Okay.
pet peeve.
Name like the top two.
Um, People that are rude. People that don't treat not only the staff at the airports or the cab driver on the way to the airport. People that are rude to other people in airports just drive me nuts. Just have a little bit of decency and respect for other people. Uh, they're doing a job and treat them as such. So yeah, I have a hard time with that, and I get it. Airports are frustrating. There's so many different levels of security you have to go through, and there's the unexpected delays. But there's a lot of stuff that's outside of people's control that blowing up and losing it on somebody is not going to be of any benefit. So like just deal with it. Like there's no use being rude. So that's my one thing. My pet peeve on planes. This one's going to be easy and it's probably universal. Don't take your shoes off. Can you just keep the shoes on? I don't want to look at your feet. I don't want to smell your socks. Um, and listen, you can go down. You're a big Chive guy. You can go and see those pictures on Chive of people taking images of people with their feet up on the windows or their feet through the armrest of the seat in front of them. Just some decency, some common courtesy. I don't want to see your socks. I don't want to see your feet. Just please. There's my pet peeve. That's my biggest.
Those are good ones. Those are definitely good ones. I'll have to keep those in mind.
Oh, one more. Don't recline your seat. Okay? Listen, they've shrunk down the space on airplanes enough that unless you're in first class where there's enough room that they've built in that you can recline your seat, if you're sitting in coach, which I'm sitting in coach a lot, don't recline your seat. I'm 6'3". You recline your seat, it's going to be banging against my knees. And listen, again, common courtesy. If you are going to recline your seat, can you just take a look back and first of all see if there's anybody behind you? And if there is, instead of pushing the button and reefing the seat back like you're trying to get into the last row, can you just recline it softly and get to the point where you might be more comfortable? But don't reef it back and bang it off me. And like again, common courtesy. understanding of your surroundings. Um, yeah, it would go a long way. It would go a long way to making everybody a lot more comfortable on a plane.
Definitely sounds like you've had a bit of experience with that.
Yeah, I could yeah, I could write books. In fact, at one time, the Sky Mall magazine. I think it was in the Sky Mall magazine. They used to have this little device that you could put in the hinge on the seat that would basically lock the person in front of you's seat in place so they couldn't recline it. I hope whoever invented that is a multi-billionaire. Um, that should be just they should just eliminate all reclining on passenger seats on planes. Just enough. Do not recline your seat.
Either that or else go back to giving us enough space in between the seats, in between the
Right.
rows.
Well, and that's not going to happen because
Yeah.
they're going to try to put an extra 3 rows in the next few years. Just don't. Just don't.
Just don't. So, with all the traveling that you've done internationally, domestically, what is the best thing about traveling, and what's the worst thing about traveling?
I mean, the best thing is being able to see other places, and listen, it makes it even better when it's on somebody else's dime and you're getting paid to go to another city, to be able to take the time to go and experience different cultures, different restaurants, different theaters, like going to New York and going and seeing a Broadway show, or going to Washington or Ottawa and walking through the two nations capitals and seeing the different memorials and statues and the things that you see on TV that, wow, I'm actually here in front of the Lincoln Memorial. Like to be able to go and experience those kind of things, that's probably the best thing that of travel. For me, the worst part of travel was just the time away, and don't don't have any sympathy for me. I knew what I was signing up for. You will not hear me complaining for the 4 months in the summer that I had to travel for 8 months. You will not hear me complain. Um, but that was the hardest thing, and it was missing out on events. It was missing out on my nieces and nephews growing up. It was not being able to share celebrations with people of holidays with people. So that would be the worst part of travel. And if if that's if that's the worst thing I have to complain about my job, I was very fortunate for 22 years to really have nothing else to complain about as far as a job goes.
100%. And yeah, those are all the questions that I have for you now. So while I turn things over to Ryan, I'll sort of vamp here for a minute just to give him some ideas of what he wants to say to wrap things up when it comes to, I don't know whether you want to talk about our topic today about international or something else that's popped into your head. But yeah, I do appreciate you sharing some of those stories, and I'm sure people would love to hear more of those types of stories outside of the rink as well as on the ice as well. So maybe in the future we can share more of those stories, and let us know down in the comments whether you'd like to hear more of those stories, and definitely submit some of your questions so that we can keep Ryan on his toes. So with that,
Mission
we'll
accomplished.
turn it over to Ryan for the last word.
Well, I'm going to get away from international for the summary, but um, one of the things one of the things I was most proud of throughout my career were the interactions that we were able to have with just fans. Um, the NHLOA, I think it was the year that's the Officials Association. I think it was a couple years after I got started. They formed. It was called Zebras Care. I'm actually wearing their sweater right now. Um, they formed Zebras Care, which was a program that was designed to give opportunities for kids that might be going through some difficult times, both personal, with some family stuff, or health related, to give them a little bit of an escape and bring them into the hockey world and to kind of get a behind the scenes. view of what the NHL is and what officials are. Sometimes we forget how important those opportunities are for officials when they get to represent their country. Sometimes we also forget that the officials in the NHL are good people. They do a lot of really good work and do a lot of things behind the scenes that a lot of people don't know about. And one of the things I was most proud of was my involvement with Zebras Care and being part of their committee. Um, to be able to bring kids in and get the opportunity to meet kids from all the different cities throughout the league and um, give them a different perspective and just a different escape of coming into our world and getting to meet the crew and go get pictures down by the ice and just get a different opportunity that just the average or the ordinary fan would get. So um, when I look back at my career, that's probably one of the most rewarding things I was involved with was the Zebras Care, and I'm proud to say that they still carry that forward. They're still having dressing room visits, and I think it's a great program, and I think the NHL officials should all be proud of what they do to put smiles on kids' faces. So, thanks for the opportunity to explain what that is about.
Well, thank you so much, Ryan, and we'll wrap things up, and we'll see you next episode.
Great, thanks, Kev.